what's missing from medical care and our mental health system, because I want you to hear this transformation. He got on the traditional Western medicine psychiatric track. They took the medications, they did the talk therapy, they did everything, and they kept getting worse.
Pars First Academy.
If you're dealing with mental and emotional health issues, or you love someone who is, I have some really important information I want to share with you. I'm going to start by talking about some military veterans, but don't bounce out because I'm just using them as an example. And this video is for anyone who is struggling or suffering with mental and emotional health issues and not getting better. I have my own experience of trying to support someone with debilitating anxiety, crushing depression, all kinds of problems, most likely misdiagnosed or undiagnosed conditions. And he got on the traditional Western medicine psychiatric track, and it wasn't enough. Hello and welcome to the Pause First Academy channel. I'm Kim Colgrove. His name was David, and he was my husband. And after a traumatic childhood and 30 years in law enforcement, almost immediately after retiring, my husband took his own life. Today, I want to talk about what's missing from medical care and our mental health system, and what's missing from the conversations we're having or not having about how to heal from trauma, anxiety, depression, and what are often mental and emotional wounds. I believe there's a missing medicine, and I don't believe this missing medicine is any one thing, and I'm going to explain that. You'll understand that by the end of this video. And I think this missing medicine has the ability to change lives, maybe save lives. So I want to tell you about this documentary I watched and the way that it completely changed the trajectory of my future. As I watched this video, I had to pause it several times. I got emotional because I kept seeing my husband and the men who were involved in this documentary. The documentary is called In Waves and War, and it's a documentary about an elite group of SEAL Team 6 members who came back from combat, and in their own words, they were broken, completely devastated mentally, emotionally, in every way. They were struggling with addiction. They were ruining marriages, ruining relationships, ruining their families. They too did everything that mainstream medicine told them to do. They went to the VA. They got on the customary psychiatric track. They took the medications. They did the talk therapy. They did everything. And they kept getting worse. What struck me immediately was how brutally honest these men were about how they actually felt and what they went through. No bullshit, no bravado, no drama, just they got very real about how bad it got. So I'm going to share some of this with you, and let's take a deep breath together, because some of this is difficult, but this is the very stuff we need to talk about. One of the things that came up for, I think, all of the men in this documentary was that they had experienced difficult childhoods, trauma and abuse in childhood way before they ever put on a uniform. One of the individuals in the documentary shared a story about having a very brutal and abusive dad. He shared that when he was a kid, they lived on 5 acres, and his dad used to make him mow the entire 5 acres with a push mower as a kid. And one day he was out there mowing, and he accidentally hit a tree root. And of course, it jacked up the blades, and the lawnmower died. He instantly knew he was in trouble, and he saw his dad charging towards him. He tells the story about his dad picking up that lawnmower, swinging it around and smashing it. And then the scene kind of shifts, and then it's him, the one telling the story, it's him yelling at his daughter and talking about how he had done the very same thing with his kids. And he shares a story about one time smashing her dollhouse. So these stories that these men tell point to generational trauma and how trauma gets handed down generation after generation. Now, I'm not saying this is your story. It may or may not be, but if it is, you're really going to want to lean forward and listen here. Now, here's a story that really got me from this documentary. One of the individuals who was also sharing about his childhood and how rough his childhood was and how he was treated by his dad. He says, I'm going to read this because I have it. I have the exact quote and I don't want to goof this up. I think he was commenting on how many people he knew, his friends in the military, that all had survived childhood abuse or had difficult childhoods. And he said the following: if we didn't have child abuse, would we even have a military? Like, that's the question I have now. Now, he said this down the road once he was already firmly on a healing path. And I think I have it right. If it's not exactly right word for word, it's really close to what he said. A quick side note about adverse childhood experiences. There was a whole study done on adverse childhood experiences, and I have a mini course over on Pause First Academy that helps you understand what it is. And there's just a short, like 10-question quiz you can take to get your ACEs score. And I just wanted to touch on that in case that's something you might be interested in. Otherwise, you can just Google it and look it up if it's something that you think might be contributing to issues and problems in your adult life or someone you love. I will include a link to that in the description box below the video, but let's move on. As someone who worked really hard to support someone who was struggling with some of these same symptoms and the same issues that these men were, I want to talk for a minute about some of the words of one of the wives from this documentary. And this really got me. So if you love someone who's suffering, or you're trying to support someone who's suffering with mental and emotional health issues, pay attention here because I think you'll relate. This is one of the wives. She's kind of one of the main characters in the documentary. And I'm just going to read to you what she says about her husband. She says, Marcus went through the VA. They did sleep studies. They did imaging. They did physiological measures. None of those things were working. He was on 10 medications. Something for sleep, something to wake up, something for focus, something for energy, something for nightmares, something for depression, something for anxiety. He was taking the medications. He was doing talk therapy. All of the things he was being told to do, and he was getting worse. I knew when my husband was in such bad shape, I knew that if we could get him detoxed and start from ground zero, like start from scratch, that we could probably help him. But he was on such a toxic cocktail of medications. He was just out of his mind. He wasn't himself. And every time he went to meet with a psychiatrist and he would say he had another symptom or a symptom had worsened, the psychiatrist would add a medication and add another medication until he was taking so much stuff that he was just gone. He wasn't himself. And to this day, I believe, had he had a different level of care, if he wouldn't have been on so many medications all at one time, I don't believe he would have taken his own life. That's a whole other conversation. It's my opinion. That's my experience. But I've met a lot of people over the years who feel similarly and who are doing everything right. They go to the doctor. They go to a therapist. They go to a psychiatrist. They take the medications. They get out in nature. They take the walks. They as far as they know, they're doing everything right. They're doing everything they're told. And they're not getting better. And in many cases, they're getting worse. And I'm going to plug one more thing in here. And this was the case in my life. And I see this a lot. There's another piece to this that makes me fiery angry. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a mental health professional. Another thing I think should happen in mental health care and psychiatry is that when these patients are placed on these strong psychotropic medications, these mental health medications, I think they should be instructed not to drink alcohol while they're taking these medications. There are warning labels on some of the bottles that say may impair this, that, don't drive or operate heavy machinery. But nowhere on any of my husband's medication, nor am I aware of his psychiatrist saying to him, do not consume alcohol while you're taking all these medications. That never happened. And I know a lot of people who have struggled similarly and kept drinking because that is a really common crutch. I understand that's a really common way to numb out and to cope, but I think it just exacerbates everything. So I want to get to what actually helped here. The medication that I'm about to tell you about, or the protocol, whatever you call it, comes from the earth. It's not a man-made synthetic chemical medication. If you are open to man-made synthetic chemical drugs that have a million side effects, which I don't call side effects, I call them effects. I don't think there's such a thing as a side effect. I think if a drug has a side effect, it's an effect. Again, a lot of this is just my opinion, so just take a breath and relax. Don't get mad at me. And I don't want to get in any trouble with anybody because I'm not a doctor, all right? I'm a woman who lost her husband, and I've witnessed other people suffer with very intense mental health and emotional health issues. And I just think there has to be a different way than medication only. That's all I'm saying. So these Navy SEALs were actually helped by psychedelic therapy, plant medicine therapy. So let me tell you about this. First of all, I want to make this very clear. I think all of them in the beginning were not just resistant, but adamantly opposed to even considering this. I think I remember one or two of them saying, like, I had never even done any kind of drugs of any kind. But here's what happened. One of the wives from the documentary, at her wit's end and completely out of hope, I've been there. She started to research alternatives to try and find some kind of help for her husband. And in her research, she discovered something called ibogaine. Ibogaine, I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's a plant-based psychoactive compound, that's used to treat severe PTSD in a therapeutic setting, a controlled therapeutic setting. And it's also often used in combination with something called 5-MeO-DMT, which is another organic compound. These medications, psychedelics, plant medicines, whatever you want to call them, are currently classified as illegal in the United States. So these men had to travel to Mexico in order to experience this therapeutic intervention. I am not by any stretch suggesting that you do something illegal. I am not trying to convince you to go take psychedelics. I am just simply explaining that there are some alternatives, and hang in there because I want you to hear this transformation. I want you to understand that the transformation these men experienced was remarkable, profound, and captured on camera. Men who, by their own account, had been completely broken, had tried everything that Western medicine and mainstream had to offer, and had taken all the steps, used this intervention, and they found healing and hope, and they repaired marriages, and they repaired relationships with their children through a treatment that mainstream medicine dismisses, ignores, or outright prohibits. Depending on what you're going through or what your loved one is going through, what I'm talking about in this video might be way too extreme for you, but what I want you to consider is that there are many alternatives, many of which can be used in concert with whatever you're doing. I am not anti-Western medicine. I'm not anti-mainstream. I'm more about both and what else is possible. I always say to people, if you need the medications, take the medications. But what else are you doing to help yourself? We cannot rely on these psychiatric medications alone. We have to embrace lifestyle changes. And there are so many different aspects to consider. And it might be a little bit of a long and winding road for sure. But there are complementary and alternative healing methods and modalities that you might not even be aware of, that mainstream medicine does tend to dismiss or even completely reject. I'm just trying to make people aware, and I want to encourage you to explore some of this. So, for some people, maybe they want to research and understand and consider a plant medicine. For other people, maybe they would understand the concept of food as medicine and how you can actually use food to help your body heal. If we're getting the right nutrition, that alone can help us heal. And there are many, many other interventions that are kind of just outside of the mainstream, but are being used with great results by thousands of people. And you might not be aware of them at all. And I am so fired up about this that I'm writing a book about it. So I'm researching and writing about holistic and integrative and off the beaten path interventions, therapies, modalities, so that people have a place to go to learn about these things, especially the people who are doing everything right and still suffering. And for people who are supporting these people and you're just at the end of your rope because you continue to watch the person you love suffering, and you guys have done everything you know to do. You've done everything that's been recommended for you, and they keep getting worse. They're not getting better. Okay, let me take a breath here. I get really fired up about this. The book I'm writing is called The Missing Medicine. I am wide open to all possibilities and 100% wide open to the idea of plant medicines because, for crying out loud, they grow from the earth. I do recommend that you go watch this video just to kind of really understand how this is done. Part of the protocol is that they have to completely detox before they go. So they have to get all of those medications. And like I said, this is all very carefully controlled therapeutic settings. All right. This is not like a bunch of hippies getting together with some psychedelics and, like taking a trip or getting high or whatever. Also, another side note, if you are a trauma exposed professional, I have a course on Pause First Academy that's called Learn to Pause that I created specifically for trauma exposed professionals, and that you might want to go check that out. I talk about what you might be carrying, adverse childhood experiences, nervous system regulation, and the tools of breathing, meditation, and mindfulness to help you learn how to self-regulate. I won't go on and on about that. If you're interested, I'll include that link in the description box. But I want to be clear here. What I'm talking about in the book I'm writing, this is not specifically for veterans, first responders, or trauma exposed professionals. This book is for everyone and anyone. It's going to be a book full of alternatives, non-traditional, unconventional, holistic, and integrative approaches to health and healing to help you improve your overall well-being. And as I write this book, I'm going to share with you guys what I'm researching, what I learn. So subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with this. There's other places you can follow me as well. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. You can see my links in the description box. But so as I research and learn about I get so excited and so interested when I'm doing this, and I'm going to share it with you guys. So step by step, as I go through this, when I learn something really good, I'm going to make videos about it, and I'm going to share some of the information with you. That's really all I have for you today. I just really wanted to share this. I wanted to recommend this documentary if it appeals to you at all. And I want to encourage you to just become aware that there are some alternatives. I'm not just saying drop Western medicine and go do all this new weird woo-woo stuff. I'm not saying that at all. But I do think that we have to start thinking about healing, what that really means, and 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 how we can use some of these alternatives to help us achieve that. Because I think too many people just think that if they take the medication and they go to therapy, I think we put way too much weight on therapists You can't just think you're going to take the medication and go to therapy and then you're supposed to be fixed. The medication alone can't fix you. The therapist alone can't fix you. But the medication and the therapist, and then you also contributing, I think it's a multi-step process. Worth it, though. So worth it, because we're talking about your life and your future and your well-being. If anything in this video resonated with you, then please subscribe to the channel. Feel free to tell me in the comments your story, what you're dealing with. Thank you for being here. I really and truly appreciate your time. Hang in here with me and watch for future videos, because I'm going to share with you everything I'm learning as I research the missing medicine. All right, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.